Hey everyone, and welcome back to other Movie Mates mini review. I am Matthew, once again joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you. So today we're bringing you guys a review of I think one of the top what will be one of the top grossing movies of the year. And these movies always are. Of course, it's the Fast and the Furious films, specifically Fast 9. Now, as you've seen by the channel recently, the content, our last sort of few podcasts have been focused on that franchise, and we've covered all eight plus Hobbs and Shaw up to this point as well. You can sort of check it out in our playlist as well if you want to see any of those or missed any. So yeah, today we're bringing you the review of the most recent installment, of which I'll pass over to Callum to explain the breakdown of what we're going to be chatting about the film. So yeah, off to you, mate.
So I feel like, seeing as the film's been out a while, we were sort of late to it. That I suppose we can probably talk spoilers from the get go. So if you haven't seen the film already, I'd recommend going to see it first and then coming back. I, from my perspective, my opinions are very positive. This film I didn't know too much about. I'd specifically avoided trailers because I hadn't actually seen the previous ones up until very recently. So I didn't know too much going into this film other than the revelation that Han was coming back, and we'll get into it. But I think certain things about this film are great, certain things are unnecessary. But I didn't but I didn't have any overt problems, which other people seem to have.
Yeah, and with that, mate, I think most people will agree who've seen this film. Like, people thought the previous eight Fast and Furious films were crazy. This one just takes the biscuit. This one is absolutely insane, but in a good way. It's a popcorn flick at its best, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it. But yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, thank you very much for everyone who supported us recently. I know Callum and myself really do appreciate that loads. And as we've said in the last couple of videos, our 100th podcast episode is coming up in about 3 episodes time. So we're doing like a Q&A, get to know us sort of thing again, with a little bit of other ideas sprinkled in there. So please be sure to leave any questions or suggestions for that episode in the comment section of this video, or any recent video in the last couple of days. We'll always be there reacting and replying to them as well. And yeah, our email and our iTunes link is also in the description for you guys too. So yeah, Callum, yeah, full spoilers, as you said, is probably the way to go. So I'll let you open the floor with your just immediate thoughts on it.
Well, this film opens with the classic Universal logo, and then we travel back to 1989, I believe, or is it? Yeah, it's 1989, isn't it?
Yeah,
We
I
pick
think
up,
so.
and we see flashbacks towards Jacob and Dom's past, and it did sort of speak to me that this film probably came from a script that was just an overt origin story for Dom. We see a lot of films that seem to have different origins of their script, and they've kind of just crowbarred things in there. For example, Transformers: The Last Night really comes across as just a straight up sort of Arthurian legend film that they've then just retrofitted to the Transformers universe by like
Exactly. Yeah.
awkwardly crowbarring in Cade Yeager. But everything else would make sense. Just if you remove those characters that existed within the Transformers universe. So instead of an overt origin, I think they probably transferred some ideas that they had for a potential origin story just into this film. Did that come across to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Callum, it did. I think with this film, it does feel like a lot of ideas from it's like ideas they had lying around, that they just cobbled in together for one film. But amazingly, it works. I think one specific one that comes to mind is like the idea to have Fast and Furious go to space, and then they end up having it here. Like, I think they very easily could have just cut that scene, and it would have made more sense clarity wise for the film. But I think the fact that it actually works in the context of the scene, to be fair, and with the Dom sort of origin story with flashbacks, whatever, it does seem like those weren't necessarily thoughts that they were going to include for the ninth film, but there were maybe ideas that were left out from a previous film that they just wanted to come back to. And I think it did well. You mentioned the Universal logo there. When it's sort of a weird, unusual Universal logo that when I first saw it, I thought, oh no, there's something wrong with the picture quality of our cinema. Like, it's a weird sort of distorted look to it. And yeah, but with that and the sort of the young Dom and Jacob stuff, like, it surprised me how big a bulk that takes up in the film. Especially, because it actually keeps coming back. It's not just the opening scene, of course. It keeps coming back when there's actually a really fantastic sort of dream sequence in the film, which is probably my favorite scene in the film, where it sort of resurfaces again. And it's a risky play because, I think it's maybe not everyone's cup of tea, that kind of flashback stuff. I just wanted to know what you thought of it, specifically in the actors in it.
Well, we came out of it, and you said to me, "Wow, that young Vin Diesel actor is really incredible." And I just made a face at you because I was in full disagreement. At least not in regards to the quality of his performance, but as a young equivalent to Vin Diesel. I
Mhm.
think the visual casting of a young Jacob is honestly fantastic. I think he looks so much like John Cena to the point it looks like his face is almost edited,
Yeah,
Looper style.
yeah, it does. Yeah,
And I think in the complete opposite, to me, clearly the only criteria for casting a young Dom was that he was willing to shave his head, because
yeah,
that is the only parallel I can see between the two of them. I mean, even worse, like they're in that dream sequence you reference, they show an even younger Dom who's maybe 7, 8 years old, and he looks, you know, as least like Vin Diesel as someone possibly could.
I had written that down as well. And on the subject of Vin Diesel, I have a few things to say here. One of which is that apparently his son is actually in the film now. Is his son Dom Toretto's son in the film? Because I also put a note here saying Dom's son in the film looks nothing like him, which will make me feel really silly if it turns out that's his actual child.
I couldn't tell you honestly. Like I haven't heard about this, but I would
It must
imagine his
be. It must
child would
be.
would, would be a bit older than that.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, like I was sort of down the Vin Diesel rabbit hole of interviews, last night, and I don't think I've ever seen an actor who's so different from his on-screen personas in my life. Like he's he gives off kind of like Alan Carr sort of vibes, to be honest, like really bubbly, really friendly, and yeah, he's great. And apparently, this is, as I said, his son is in the film, but also like Vin Diesel's like 55 or something. I did just not expect him to be that old.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, the timeline of this franchise is a bit messy, with multiple of the films turning out to be prequels to the third film,
Mhm.
just to, artificially retcon Han into the backstory of the main characters. So the timeline is a bit messy. We don't really know exactly what year we're in, but based on the technology, it must be the present day or later. And then, it flashes back to 1989. So that means that Dom and Jacob are both in their 50s, but I feel like they're definitely not meant to be. I mean, how old is John Cena? Surely, and he's in his 30s.
Johnson is 44, actually, which is a bit older than I
What?
thought. Yeah, he looks younger, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, they're 50 something. I mean, like John Cena does look different in this film to how he normally does. Even
Yeah, he
how he
does.
looks in interviews right now, he somehow looks sort of older and more like. Did you think he
Yeah,
looked older in this film than he does even right now?
I think it's the longer hair because like whenever John Cena was like, in the peak of his WWE powers, like he always just rocked the shaved head. Ironically. Um, another thing about this film, I think they do the camera work really well because there's a lot of scenes where Vin Diesel and John Cena have to like face off against each other, and I think I correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Vin Diesel's like is a tall bloke. Like I sort of I don't think he's like any like the Rock size or anything, but like the camera work's done very well. Whereas like they make him look taller than he is, almost like the opposite of what they did with Hugh Jackman in the X-Men films. The way they kind of
Hmm.
wanted to make him smaller because of Wolverine, but here, like I think the camera work's done well because there's a lot of scenes where Dom and Jacob are like face to face with each other and they look the same
Yeah.
height and the same build. But I don't know. I think and it's either John Cena's not as big as I thought he was, or Vin Diesel's taller than I thought he was, but I'm not too sure. But
I
there's
think I
definitely
think it's probably down to Vin Diesel's ego. I'm not gonna lie. I was reading up on have you heard of this point system that they had in previous films?
no, mate, I didn't. Haven't heard of it.
So essentially, within the contracts of Jason Statham, Dwayne Johnson, and Vin Diesel, they all had it within their contracts that pretty much on screen their characters give as good as they get. So for every punch that is thrown from a character they're fighting, they throw a punch in return or an equivalent level of attack, so that each characters by the end of the fight scene are equally damaged. As to not
Yeah,
present that their character is uh, you know not incredibly talented or not invincible.
yeah.
So pretty much that just sounds like a massive ego trip to me. that they can't possibly conceive of their character being beaten by a slight percentage more than the other character. So
Yeah,
I feel like this
yeah.
sort of feeds into that, where he's like, well, he can't look taller than me.
Yeah, and there's a few things that back that up because I was rewatching a scene from Fast Five where The Rock and Vin Diesel have their big sort of face off, and you can definitely tell that like in the contracts, like Vin Diesel can't lose a fight because like as soon as The Rock has him, in a bad spot, Vin Diesel somehow finds a way to win. And there's also a specific scene in this film when Vin Diesel's head like smacks off like the top of a door frame. And like I don't know how strong Vin Diesel's head is, but like the door frame just goes all over the place. Um,
I don't even remember that.
oh mate, honestly, is class. Um, I think one thing about this film for me is that there's a specific section of it where I think it's quite lackluster. I think the start is good. At the start it starts off very well. There's a good action scene there, and I think the end is quite strong. It's just in that sort of mid section, just before we sort of see Han return. Sorry, if I'm a little laggy here in the screen. It's hopefully it'll fix itself, but yeah, there's a lot of just sort of scene change after scene change, and it seems quite needless. Like, you have to cut from Sean back to, Mia and Letty in Tokyo. So it didn't make narrative sense to me because it felt like just quite choppy editing wise.
Yeah, it is a huge cast, so I mean, it is justifiable. I think, but it did feel a bit breakneck in points, and it's great seeing returning characters like Sean. But yeah, it did sort of confuse the edit just a little bit.
Yeah. I'm just gonna pause the recording here, mate, just to see if my
Uh,
camera.
I don't
Uh,
remember what you were saying.
But yeah, one thing I will say about this film, it surprised me with like the lack of a villain presence because we sort of collectively mentioned, well, you mentioned it, and I agreed about like the uncertainty behind Mr. Nobody and his demise, but also like Cypher's barely in this. It's it is predominantly uh that foreign dignitary and Jason and sorry and say again John Cena really having the villainous presence here. I thought that was a bit of a unusual choice given that they'd sort of hyped Cypher up so much in the last movie and just sort of bend her off sort of the Rock style in in this one.
Yeah, the villain presence is weak, I'd say, and the MacGuffin of the film is even weaker than normal.
Yeah.
It is always this piece of spy software that they'll use for nefarious reasons. It's happened in Fast Five, Six, Seven, Eight, and now Nine. Or no, not Fast Five. Excuse me, just four of them.
Only
Don't
four.
want to be unfair. That'd be ridiculous. But four straight films where it's just we're going to use this piece of technology and destroy the world, or bring the world to its knees so we become the leaders. And I'm just sick of it. I need something new and fresh, and I don't think we're going to see it.
Yeah, it felt very like cut and paste from some of the previous installments there, mate. You're right. And I think another thing is, they have to cram a lot of characters back in the franchise just to make sure you don't forget about them. Sort of namely, Han, me, and Sean. I think that really could work in terms of, the later two films, which you informed me last episode was kind of a big two-parter for potentially to conclude the series forever. So I think if you're going to do that, um it does excite me because Cypher's got to be the big villain, sort of the Thanos of this universe, really, in terms of you don't see her, you think you see her die in this film, but obviously you don't. So they must be building up to something like that in the future, potentially Mr. Nobody returning or something, to something to that degree.
Yeah, this film is sort of known for its one-off throwaway villains, but there are returning presences, but normally they're redeemed and brought on side. So I guess depends how they want to play it. I would like to see one of these days where the villain wins, and then we have to see what happens after that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in a Thanos style, but they're always talking a big game about using this piece of spyware to bring the world to its knees. I'd like to see it happen at least once.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, yeah, like on that note as well, with every movie kind of having that positive ending where the good guys win, I at least respect this film for sort of acknowledging the sort of invincibility of the characters, with Tyrese Gibson sort of say like actually question whether they are, have some supernatural abilities or something. I thought that was quite a fun little sort of take a laugh at the series kind of thing. And yeah, as I say, like all the craziness and the action scenes are really dialed to 11 with this film, with outer space and stuff like that. So it's crazy, it's fun, but it's definitely got its audience, if you know what I mean. Like if you're a fan of these films like we are, you'll enjoy it like we did. So and apparently it's done very well at the box office too so far. So it's clearly working.
Yeah, these films are, a fun popcorn summer event film, and I think if they're 2 years apart, that's enough time to rest and recover, and not remind yourself of how similar each film is. So I think provided we don't do multiple rewatches between now and number 10, I think hopefully it'll come across as fresh and original, if not at least fun.
Yeah, I'm still going to be excited for it, you know what I mean? Which is not something I'd expect myself to say with this franchise, 9 movies later after starting off the podcast with the first one, like a few months ago.
Yeah, my I said to my brother that I was massively surprised I enjoyed this film, and he said to me, "Cars, really?" Because like it is pretty much the antithesis of what I would normally enjoy. So it is a big surprise, and it's one I appreciate because I
Yeah.
think if you can find as many films that you enjoyed that are sort of enjoyed by the wider population, you have more opportunities to have a fun conversation about films that everybody likes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, mate, definitely. And with that, I actually don't have much more to say on this film. Really, just I do think the plot is a little scrambled, just in terms of a little too many scene changes, a little too many different environments. But that being said, I think it gradually settles down towards the end and actually concludes with a really compelling action sequence. Although I would have respected if the film just wouldn't have sort of settled the Dom Jacob rivalry. I think it was maybe settled a bit too quickly for me just in one film. I would have liked to see John Cena potentially return and sort of squash the beef in a potential later film, a couple films down the line. But you can't I can't have everything with this film, and I do think it still was a fitting and a decent conclusion to that story.
Yeah, you mentioned John Cena there, and we came out of the film and you said how impressed you were with John Cena, and quite honestly, I think he gave a better performance in the Fred trilogy. To me, I think he can absolutely do comedy, and he looks great in the Suicide Squad, but I just don't think I can take him seriously.
Yeah, I think. Do you think him and The Rock? Do you think that's a fitting comparison, or do you think The Rock sort of done enough in his career where he's a level above John Cena, acting wise?
I think you can take The Rock seriously. I think he can do sort of a stern, serious face, and you don't start to laugh. But John
Yeah,
Cena, I don't know why, because I think he presents more of a tough guy persona than The Rock. I think The Rock is intentionally trying to be that sort of gentle giant figure that Dave Batista is,
yeah,
and John
yeah.
John Cena, I think, is more of a tough guy persona. But when it comes to his acting, whenever he was trying to be stern and serious, I just find it comical.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard to say if that's intentional for the film or not. I don't think it. I don't think it is, given that Jacob is quite a serious character. He suffers a lot of sort of by his own admission, sort of is angry that he's in Dom's shadow. Um, but I just really couldn't buy the whole sort of. There's a little bit too much twists and turns with like the father's death, because it sort of seemed like initially they played it off as an accident, and then they played it off as if Jacob had killed him, but then they played it off at the end by saying that he wanted to die. So it's kind of like three twists for one death that didn't really amount to much. So um I could maybe be a little bit critical of that, but I think maybe John Cena does have the potential to return to the franchise. Just but I actually like to see him with The Rock. I don't know if they get on or whatever, because I know Vin Diesel and The Rock don't, but I'd like to see that in a film.
I know that there was a tweet that was sent out a few days ago that someone said, in response to Dave Bautista is obviously doing very well. The
Yeah,
Rock is doing very well, and John Cena was in this film, so they're sort of in the public eye right now, especially being these big action stars. And someone said on Twitter, "Oh my God, we need to get an action film with Dave Bautista, John Cena, and Dwayne Johnson." And then Dave Bautista just replied with, "No thanks." So
Jeez.
it seems there might be a bit of beef there, or he's just doing so well in his career he doesn't sort of need the support.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave Bautista is another one of those names you forget was actually a wrestler before all the fame. So I just immediately jumped to, Drax and Guardians of the Galaxy, but I forgot he actually was a very big wrestler before acting. So yeah, there you
He is
go.
doing so well right now.
Yeah, he's done a lot of big stuff, especially those kind of Netflixy, Amazon Prime style
Mm.
action. That's kind of his thing. He's kind of cemented that as his own sort of domain, really. Which is fair play to him. Like I have a lot of time for him.
Yeah, I mean, I watched My Spy, which I thought was going to be absolute dog shit, and he carried it.
Yeah, no, I do like Dave Bautista. I do. Have you got any more
You
remarks
know,
on the film, mate?
I do have just a few. You mentioned Jacob and Dom's dad's death, and I just think that racing is such a fucked sport because people are still racing after a guy's car has exploded and they've clearly died. You know, you see in Formula One, if there's a big crash, people are just they still want to win, and I'm like, how is that not day done, race cancelled? It just seems
Yeah,
a bit messed up.
yeah,
And
especially yeah. Go ahead.
even more importantly, how is intentionally crashing into someone not a crime? It's not like a demolition derby. It's racing. And we've talked about death in sport before with Rocky Four and Ivan Drago's killing of Apollo Creed,
Yep.
and how at least in that sport, you're sort of you're signing away your safety, and they had the opportunity to throw in the towel, but he
Yeah.
had something to prove, so he kept going. But here, his dad wanted to throw the race, but I don't think you know I don't think legally you should be allowed to just crash into someone and it be cool.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like he was planning to through the race until the guy had sort of actually nudged him as well, and during that. But yeah, like it's crazy. It is crazy to me 'cause it always reminds me of. Strangely, it reminded me of like was it like Chick Hicks or something in Cars or whatever when he that's like the car who was like nudging into all the other cars, and yeah, it seems weird. Um, I yeah, like like that whole sort of NASCAR scene, like it's huge in America. It's not really so much over here. Like over here, it's more like Formula One and stuff, which is different. But yeah, it's mental that that's not like a crime punishable by like prison. It's mad.
Yeah, and this film, another big talking point we had coming out of the cinema was Roman, because they do sort of
Yeah,
fake out his death a couple of times, and the discussion of invincibility is fair. After he is being shot at by dozens of people, in the first act of the film, and I think both of us were so on board with them killing Roman, because he's a
especially in
arrogant,
that moment.
sexist prick, and whenever they faked it out, I was so disappointed that he came back, and I was just so deflated because we actually just pissed ourselves
It
laughing in the
was great.
cinema
That was
because I think
fantastic.
we were so overjoyed that they played it off so offhandedly. We
Yeah.
are like, my God, he's finally dead, and they played it off as a joke. This couldn't have gone better. And then he just reappears, and I think we both audibly groaned.
Yeah.
But by the end, I think he came close to winning me over with his speech at the end. Where he talks about the fact that they aren't invincible, but that's okay because they have each other, and it sort of feeds back into the theme of family.
Yeah, and with that, mate, like I actually thought the film was going to kill one of them off, specifically Roman later on, because they kind of sort of teased that whole like invincibility kind of conversation. I thought there was going to be a potential sort of um you know uh, risk of death there for one of the characters. I definitely do think something like that will happen in the next two films. You know what I mean? I think I don't think you could. I don't think audiences would buy it anymore, to be honest. Buying it anymore if they just didn't kill one of them off. But um yeah, and on the subject of like going back to sort of returning characters, I think it was nice of them to sort of have that little sort of Brian nod with the sort of the blue. I don't know if it's like a Subaru or something, but like the classic sort of Brian car appearing there. It's at the end, sort of nice acknowledging that like him in the franchise and stuff. I think they had said like he was babysitting the kids as well, which explained why he wasn't there. But it's just sad as well, isn't it? Like they're not the same really without him.
Yeah, seeing that empty chair at the table was just tragic. And
Yeah.
I suppose it is the most respectful thing to say that this character is still out there, and I'm glad they didn't replicate him with CGI again. Because I feel like respectfully that opportunity should remain with the incident, or with the situation with Fast 7.
Yeah.
So if we see him again and that's his family's wishes, that's of course their prerogative, but I think they've played it so far as respectfully as they can.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Any more remarks, mate?
A few things about for the returning characters. We see Lucas Black again, and despite looking 60 years old, this time he actually did manage to win me round with his character, because I think we were both like, who is this guy? Whenever we watched Tokyo Drift, we both recognized it's a good film, it's a fun film, but the character is just this sort of caricaturish version of an American, in this mystical land, that they're presenting.
Yeah.
It's as though he's gone to a different universe, because he's such a, you know, because he's such
Texas boy.
a country bumpkin. So that sort of ham-fisted portrayal of the character, I think, was a bit hard to swallow in Tokyo Drift, and then his appearance in Fast 7 was a bit distracting, with his advanced age at that point, pretending to be like 18 years old. But here, they're at least not pretending that it's a few years on. Well, I mean, several years on. So this time, I think he was really able to win me round, and he was just charming.
I agree. He's his charisma, and with that, I expected to sort of the movie to suffer with the lack of The Rock or Jason Statham. Obviously up until the credit scene, of course, but I expected it to really suffer just the lack of sort of charisma and the lack of sort of charm. But it really didn't really hinder it at all for me. Actually, it actually showed that these films can exist with like big characters in them, and it kind of gives me hope that the films can exist without Vin Diesel as well. Even though this is like a Dom Toretto film, at heart. Um, but yeah, like I didn't actually notice it as much as I thought I would. I think John Cena is like not it's not like a like for like replacement for The Rock, but I still think John Cena did a good enough job to sort of fill in that gap, as well as sort of stand on his own as a serviceable actor. But yeah, I mean, I can't really complain with the lack of sort of the Hobbs and Shaw, because I don't think these films need them, because at the end of the day, the first four didn't have them at all. So, you know, I think it goes through the films can stand on their own.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And we talked about the third act. You said you enjoyed it, but I do think it pretty much just plays out like the end of Fast 7. Where they're being
Mm,
pursued through the city, by Jimon Honsu. I think it pretty much just plays out identically to that, except it's during the day near some cliffs. So I
yeah,
was, there's a lot more driving in this film than the last couple of films, and I think the cars feel a lot more tangible. They don't feel like a CGI mess, like the scene where the cars go autonomous in the Fate of the Furious, where they all just wildly crash into each other. That I think felt very distant in CGI, but here, when they're driving around, like to me, it feels as real as it did back in the older films. But wow, there's too much driving in this film. I think they're, of course they're car films, but first and foremost that they are car films. But there's just scenes of them just driving, doing nothing, just in these high speed pursuits. There's not a lot of action, just senseless chasing.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It actually reminded me of the scene in Deadpool 2 with the big sort of big lorry. If you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Um, in some ways, John Cena is quite like the Juggernaut and just the full-on brawler. But yeah, I mean, I think the film. I actually think that the sort of scene in Edinburgh was quite unique, because like you usually see, the Fast and Furious films needs hustling, bustling cities with huge skyscrapers or whatever. But like to have it in Edinburgh, it's quite sort of a small scale for these films, and I actually think it worked quite well. And I do think the film is. I think the character of Ramsey does gets a lot more to do here, and she's great. I think she's absolutely fantastic. A really nice addition. Um, but yeah, I think there's maybe a bit too much of a reliance on just it sounds ridiculous, but like maybe a bit too much of reliance on just cars. Like, I think you could take out cars in a lot of these action scenes and it would still work. Um, but yeah, I would agree with that. The last thing I wanted to say about the film actually, was I mentioned this to you, when we saw the credits, and for anyone who watches the UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou is in this film, and it kind of just struck a chord with me that like these films really, and I think Cardi B is also in this film.
Oh
Um,
God, yeah.
was I right
Don't
with
don't don't
that?
don't get me started. Like after I read that on Wikipedia, I was dreading seeing this film because I didn't know how big a part she was going to play. The description of her character sort of seemed to insinuate that it was going to be a character integral to Dom's past. So I thought we'd see her sort of peppered throughout the film, or have sort of at least the level of appearance that Aiza Gonzalez had in Hobbs and Shaw, where she was the arms dealer, the had a pass with Jason Statham. So I thought she'd have that level of role, but thank God it was limited to one scene, because it was the line delivery was awful, and I don't like her as a presence.
Yeah. And like it is something about these films, like they love to sort of have these celebrity cameos, and also cameos by like big actors. Helen Mirren's in this as well, which is a bizarre turn of events. Like I think that whole section just could have very easily been cut out. It just felt weird to me. I just think that whole sort of scene in London with Cardi B and Helen Mirren, yeah, I don't know why it's there, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's just funny because I think something about these films and fighters as well. Obviously, here Francis Ngannou, and then the previous ones Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano. Like it seems quite popular for UFC fighters and wrestlers to take a turn in acting, which is because it's worked for a lot of people. Obviously, namely The Rock and John Cena. So why not?
Yeah, this film is 2.5 hours long. No need to be. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, I uh it didn't feel like 2.5 hours long, but it did not need to be as long as it could have been. And one very easy way to shorten this is take out Han's role completely, because he's in the film maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and he serves no purpose other than the fact that he's raised this key to the weapon named L. But it is really just a really bad attempt at returning him to the franchise. And I really think his death was meant to be a significant point in the franchise. Multiple films were made into prequels, just to preempt this huge sort of franchise shattering death.
Mhm.
He plays such an important role, and then for it to be played as a fake out, and for him to have been alive this whole time, it was just
No
I
need,
I,
really.
I never like that. When they bring back a dead character, and here it just felt so forced and needless. It could have been anyone that raised that person. Anyone could have been the key to the weapon. You did not need Han. You did not need him to have been the person that raised that character. It was just so unnecessary to me. Wasted time, and sort of you know removed all the poignance from this death.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, it could have been anyone who raised that kid, to be honest with you. And it was unnecessary, and it kind of ruined it in a way as well. I can't believe it made it in, to be honest. I can't believe they thought that was a good idea. Not that it was necessarily bad, but it just could have saved so much runtime for other exciting, more intriguing things. Um,
Yeah, and reduced a lot of headaches, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and with that, like, if you're gonna bring Han back, I really just, like, I think having that sort of Han and Giselle dynamic is brilliant. Like, if you're gonna kill one off, like, I just why just bring one back? Bring both of them back. Not that Han can't stand on his own as a character, because I think he can. As I say, he's one of my favorites in the franchise, but I just think like it was just a big, massive no, big error. Just having it just for the like just for him to be the guardian of the MacGuffin of the movie, so to speak. It's just a little silly, and unnecessary, I believe.
Yeah, the one final point I had was, you mentioned, the redemption arc being sort of very quick and glossed over for Jacob. And I think it's not even a redemption arc whatsoever. He literally only turns on his team because they turned on him first. He would not have gone to Dom's side if things had actually gone his way. So I mean, you
Yeah.
can't say that this character redeemed himself, or that he became a better person. It's literally just that his plan failed, and he had to go to his backup so that he wasn't murdered.
Yeah, I think it was wrapped up in a bow a little too nicely. I would have preferred a bit more consequences. And I probably should know better because like there's very few consequences in these films. But with that, I do think it was wrapped up a little bit too nicely where I didn't like it. It wasn't for me, mate. But still, I still really liked it, mate. I don't know what's wrong with me. I really like this. It's a
Yeah,
weird.
I think every Fast and Furious film you can pick holes in, but I
Yeah.
think the good outweighs the bad, or if not the good, at least the fun. I think we always have a good time, except with Too Fast, Too Furious, and Fast and Furious. In my opinion, I did not enjoy those films, but the rest of them, there's fun to be had at the
I
very
agree.
least.
I agree. And with that, mate, if you've got nothing else to say, I'll ask you, massive hit or piece of shit?
Well, I think that we're probably going to get around to doing a tier list of these films. One of these days. I think that that's a way for us to maybe do some retroactive reviews of some MCU films, or just give our opinions on the rankings of certain films. And I think that this franchise is definitely ripe for that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of discussion there as to what makes a good Fast and Furious film. And here, I think it is amongst the higher end of the good ones. I think it's maybe just falling a bit shy of number five, number seven. So to me, I'd rate it quite highly amongst them, and definitely give it a massive hit.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree, mate. I think this is a really good Fast and Furious film, and a very good action film. Action films don't have to make sense. Like, as I say, like I watched Black Widow today, and like when you compare Fast and Furious films to other action films, you kind of think like Fast and Furious just so out of the ballpark that like other action films start to make sense because Fast and Furious is so crazy. It's just not the case because I think all action films have a ludicrous touch to them. Like when I saw Black Widow today, there's so many scenes that like if we're in a Fast and Furious film, people will be saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous." Like it's just comedy at this point. Like I think the Fast and Furious films get a really hard time for being a little bit too crazy. Okay, yes, they go to space in this film, and yes, in the previous film, Dom saved Letty by jumping across a bridge. Like action films don't have to make sense. That's why they're so popular. Like people just like them for popcorn. I know I do certainly. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
and at least that turn came early enough in the franchise. If you have this well-established group of characters who are very grounded in reality, and then it just breakneck devolves into that. I think that there may be issues there. Very early on, we were seeing these characters as very larger than life. Doing these high risk stunts. It's not like it came out of nowhere. It was a natural evolution.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. So like, if I were gonna just say as a massive hit or piece of shit, of course it's a massive hit, and if we're gonna go for out of 10, I'd probably have to go for an 8. I think it's a very strong entry into the franchise, mate.
Yeah, comparing the films to themselves, once again, as we normally do, I think I definitely agree on an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, and with that, mate, I suppose that wraps up the mini review. Unless you've got anything else to say.
I feel like, do you think at this point that was podcast length?
It
I
could
couldn't
be.
really make a call.
I always find the Zoom calls hard to judge with times because like there's times where, like we've recorded for like what seems like 10 minutes and it ends up like an hour. Like
Yeah, and
The
I
Snyder
could have
cut.
sworn the other day when we reviewed Loki episode 2 that was 45 minutes and it was 28.
Yeah, like like viewers of the podcast, they'll probably like wondering how we spent like 2.5 hours talking about the Snyder cut, but like it didn't feel that long in person. Like it just felt like just a chat about DC films and ended up being like our
Yeah.
longest podcast or one of them. But I
Yeah,
had a
and
good
then it just turned into us talking about cinema in general, and our thoughts on the industry. It's
yeah.
like it was very interesting. I think that's probably the one I'm proudest of.
That's my favorite podcast I think we've done, other than the specials or anything. I really like I like the Snyder Cut because it was back to our bread and butter or whatever with the superhero films. Um, And with that, if this ends up being a podcast, if it doesn't, sure, we'll just do this anyway. A bit of future episode chat, something we haven't done for quite some time.
Hmm.
But yeah, now that we're getting back into a fixed schedule for the podcast, reasonably fixed, I'll pass it to Callum to explain what videos you'll be seeing in the next week or two.
So coming up soon, we have further Loki reviews. We'll be reviewing episode 5. Episode 6 is coming out next week.
Yeah.
Riverdale's back next week, so we'll be jumping on that, and hopefully in a couple of weeks, Cash will come on to talk to us about the new back half of the season. When it comes to full length podcasts, the next one we'll be covering is Sex Work. We haven't gotten around to the Tarantino one. I got about a third of the way through Reservoir Dogs, and I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I know Matthew had watched Pulp Fiction, so we're piecing together between the
Yeah.
two of us. The first few,
Might
but
be a
I,
month
I
or
think
two
I think
away.
we'll reserve that for a few months from now. I'm trying to fit it into the schedule as it is. But with Sex Work, we're going to be talking about Midnight Cowboy, Boogie Nights, and The Escort. 3 movies that I'm really excited to talk about. 2 are huge, in the film industry, and come with a lot of prestige, and I'm really excited to see. And then The Escort is one of my favorite independent films of all time, and I hope Matthew enjoys it as much as I do. Based on the past of me recommending films to Matthew, I don't think it's going to go well. The Voices was one of my favorite films of all time, and Matthew took a big fat dump on that. So I'm really hoping I don't see that happen this time.
Fingers crossed, not fingers crossed. But yeah, it's going to be a exciting couple of weeks in the podcast, especially with when an MCU film releases as well. It's always like it's a big thing for us because it's one of our favorite franchises. So excuse me. So that's always exciting, as well as Riverdale. We love we love that shit. So
Yeah.
so yeah, it's
And
gonna be
if
exciting.
this is a podcast, then we're accidentally one step closer to 100.
I'm about to say, yeah, this will end up being like the 90th podcast. And apologies if this is a podcast, because like the last 3 podcast episodes will all be Fast and Furious ones. So apologies about that, but sure, tough shit. But yeah, thanks very much for today, mate. I actually it was a
Thank
really
you.
funny recording. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, for watching. As I say, leave your comments in the comment section down below, or whatever. We'll always there to read them. But yeah, hope you guys are all well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well too. Take care, and bye bye.
Bye bye.